Welcome to my video review of the 2020 miniseries of Stephen King's The Stand. I'm going to do this review in parts, roughly 6 parts, if all goes according to plan. So, spoilers ahead. If you have not watched the 2020 miniseries, there will be massive spoilers with the review. First, in part 1, before I get into things, I'd like to talk about why I'm even doing this review. As you can see behind me, I am a pretty big Stephen King's The Stand fan. I have 2 of the uncut versions of the novel. I did think that the newly released version was something else, but it was just the same novel with a new cover on it, same as the miniseries. I have the DVD 1994 miniseries, which I put in a Blu-ray case because I never thought they'd actually release the Blu-ray version of the 94 miniseries. And I also have the graphic novels of The Stand, which I thought were done phenomenally well. The Stand has a pretty good impact on me growing up for my creative mind. I just got really drawn in. I was first introduced to The Stand with the 94 miniseries by one of my best friends, and I just got hooked. I've watched it numerous times over the years. Fell in love with the characters and the idea, and I've always had, ever since then, I've always had in the back of my mind just this idea about an apocalyptic story, my own version of it, what I wish the characters had done different, and fantasized about scenarios of what those characters could have done differently, and so on. And after the seeing the miniseries, I then read the book. For the most part, I skipped things here and there just because it was so massive. I did have the Gary Sinise, Molly Ringwald covered version, but it got beat up and thrown out a long time ago. And it really influenced my own writing because when I was young, I was an aspiring writer, writing short stories about this, that, and the other, usually about things that I enjoyed, whether it be video games or TV series or whatever, my own version of things. For example, I was big into Star Trek Voyager back in the day, so I would write about a sitcom, my own sitcom rather, about Starfleet Academy, which I thought had a pretty good premise because of really the endless possibilities with that concept. I still think it would fly today. But back to The Stand, I have my own vision of an apocalyptic story, which I'm still currently writing. I more so started writing that back in 2016, and it's taken a long time, but for various reasons. But The Stand was a huge influence on me for that. And it's been a long time wanting to have the miniseries remade, whether it was going to be made instead into a trilogy or, you know, a fully fledged miniseries. I knew it was going to be a huge undertaking, and I was hoping they were going to do it properly and correctly. We'll see during this review if they manage to pull that off or not. What I think makes a good adaptation. My opinion may differ, of course, from others. This is only my opinion. I can contradict myself very easily with what I think is a good adaptation based on the successfulness of it. What I think is a good adaptation is when they stay as true as possible to the source material. Because the way I figure it is, if a book or a video game or potentially another source is popular enough with the community where it warrants a TV show or a movie, there's a reason it got that popular. And it's not necessarily just based on the simple idea of the story, whatever it may be. It also is about the characters and their journeys and their struggles and the settings and the atmosphere and the descriptiveness of the story in the whole book. I'm going to reference a book. It could be other sources of media, but more over a book. So when an adaptation is as true as possible to the source material, that's what I consider a successful adaptation, what I like. The most accurate adaptation that I can recall would be from a comic book called The Watchmen, more so the director's cut or the extended version of The Watchmen. And watching that after reading the comic, it was as close to the source material as I can imagine. And I guess that's not exactly the best comparison because I don't think it was that successful financially, but that was more of a niche audience with that. And a different example of an adaptation that was successful that was not too true to the source material is the Resident Evil series. Of course, based on the video game Biohazard from Japan, made in the States to Resident Evil. I was a huge fan of that. And when they came out with when I heard they were coming out with the movie, I was really stoked. And then I was really disappointed when I saw it because it was hardly anything like the video game. It had its moments. And obviously that went on to be very successful because it had multiple sequels and everything. Now, it was still a success, but it was still a little bit of a letdown because it was not, in my opinion, a true adaptation because it didn't capture the essence of what made Resident Evil so popular in the first place. It got a new audience, I think, in that example. A different example where things were popular and stayed true to their source material for the most part were Game of Thrones and The Walking Dead. Game of Thrones stayed true to the adaptation through the first season for the most part, and then it kind of branched off a little bit after a little while. Still a very popular series. I love that series. Walking Dead, same deal. The difference with Walking Dead's adaptation is they changed things here and there, but they never left that main story. And they never made you feel like you've lost the essence of the story until after, spoiler alert with Walking Dead, after Rick left the show, then the whole thing fell apart and jumped the shark, in my opinion. It's hard to watch these days, but that's a whole other story. So, with that being said, the 94 version of The Stand is a pretty decent adaptation of the novel. Of course, the novel is just so massive and there's so much story, they couldn't include everything. And so I understand why things were left out and why they had to change different things. And I'm honestly okay with them changing things, depending on the situation and circumstances. But I think there should be a reason behind it, whether it won't translate properly to screen, or more so. And the more I think about it, the more harder at adapting The Stand would be to today's society due to right now how culture is. I'll try not to get into that too much. But anyway, that's my idea of a successful adaptation, is one that stays as true as possible to the source material. If you can even use the lines verbatim from the book, I love that. And I'll get more into that after. So to end part one, I want to talk about what Stephen King himself talked about in his book, which is what I would overall describe this 2020 version of The Stand. He had two prefaces in the uncut version of The Stand, talking about buying the book, and then after you bought the book, another preface where he talks about his writing and other things. But what he also does is he talks about the story of Hansel and Gretel, because he gives an example of good writing versus bad writing. And he even writes the story of Hansel and Gretel in his preface, giving just the bare bones minimum of what the story is, and removing emotion attachments, removing any kind of descriptiveness for the most part, and just giving what it is, the detail, not even details, just the facts and the bare bones minimum of the story. And he even says in there, I don't know what you think about that version, but I think it's a loser. And it's just the story's there, but it's not boss, his words. And what I think he meant by that is it's missing its heart and soul, missing any kind of emotional attachment to the story and the characters and everything. And that's exactly how I would describe this miniseries of Stephen King's The Stand. So that's my overall impression, and I'll get more into that in part 2. So now we'll get into the spoilers and more direct information. So there you go.